We're back in the rant bit of TNC, and we're going to be talking about something again today based on what else? Paganism, the mentality and the attitudes of paganism. Now, I have a new video up on Room 313, which you should check out. It's about St. Winifred's Well in Flintshire in Wales, which I visited earlier on in the year, and it's about the crossover period between paganism and Christianity in terms of religious sites and shrines, and also, Saint Winifred was almost certainly a pagan goddess, just like, or was based on some kind of pagan goddess, just like Saint Bridget was Breed here in Ireland. Now, there's some very good comments already coming in on that video, and that's what's great. I love the discussions on these comments. I love the banter that goes on. It gives me lots of food for thought as well. So thank you guys who added this dialogue. One comment we mentioned about the idea, based on a statement I make in the video, that Christians reluctantly kept the holy wells open because two reasons. One, that people had such great belief in them, in their healing properties, both psychologically and also physically, and also they were lucrative businesses for the church. Now, the other part of this is they were, particularly the Presbyterian religions that came along later on. Some person made a superb comment on that Catholicism is 70% paganism, whereas the Presbyterian religions are 5% paganism, and that's why there's a lot of sectarianism against Catholics for that reason, because you hear that here in Ireland a lot. You'll have groups like the Orange Order constantly going on about papist or Catholic pagan idolatry. That's because the Catholic Church if you're going to become a Christian, become a Catholic. Particularly, I don't mean you have to worship the Pope or anything, but the Catholic rites and so on are probably the best road to go down in terms of Christianity. Particularly if you look at the Tridentine Catholicism pre-Vatican II of 1967. But so, again, I don't have a problem if you're a Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Jew, pagan, atheist. That's your own business, what you do. Like your sex life, it's your own business. What I am bothered about is when you impose your prejudice upon people like me based on your programming, and that's when it's wrong. Other than that, freedom all the way in terms of religious freedom. Now, and I'll also point out things that your religion has done to ours or stolen from ours, and that's fair game. We've no problem with that. Pagans have had to listen to us being called baby killers and sacrificers and, barbarians for centuries, millennia. So we're allowed a few swipes back. There's so few of us. But we're growing and we're coming back. Now, in that video, I made a comment about that the waters to particularly the Reformed version of Catholicism, the Presbyterians, the Protestants, see them as water coming from hell. That's because of all the Christian religions, the most Abrahamic in its nature is the King James Bible Presbyterianism. It's purely Second Temple rabbinical Judaism, and rather than having Jesus as a kind of a Buddha, or I don't have a problem with the idea of Jesus being seen in a kind of a spiritual light. The problem is that with the King James Presbyterians, they reduce him back to what he really is, Rabbi Yeshuva, pushing, the King James Bible is absolutely an abridged version of the Babylonian Talmud. That's why it was created. They wanted to make Catholicism less pagan. And that's why if you're going to be a Christian, be a Catholic, I would suggest. Now, regarding the waters from hell, this tells us a lot psychologically about this Second Temple rabbinical Presbyterianism and its relationship with nature. The Catholics are much better. I'm not because I was raised Catholic. I can't stand the Pope and the Vatican and all that shite. But I'm just saying for facts here. The Abrahamics in their purest form, have a difficulty with nature. Why? Because they were thrown out of paradise. Adam and Eve were kicked out of paradise for being amongst and being close to nature, they ate the forbidden fruit. They were they listened to the serpent. These are all, pagan archetypes. The apple recorded in the middle. You have the star of Lucifer. This is represented by the path of the planet around the sun in relationship to the earth and the night sky, giving us the pentagram. And they were cast out of paradise into the wilderness of the Middle East, into the land of sand and lizard and goat, where there was a sense of being expelled. And this neuroses has been carried on forever. You have, Jesus defied the sanctity of water by walking on water. We know that probably didn't happen. Probably wasn't, to Jesus is basically a very clever archetype put together brilliantly by the Romans. And it's almost certainly based on some other previous story. But anyway, he walks on water. He doesn't immerse himself in water. And you have John the Baptist who baptizes by water, but he is not the Messiah. He is the Messiah is beyond water. And this is the idea of the nature thing. And this comes from being a desert people, being locked away from nature, where there is no nature. And that's not to say they didn't have farming, and they did have farming and things like that. But remember, farming and agriculture is a kind of a war with nature. You talk to any farmer anywhere in the world, particularly in a country like Ireland, it's a constant battle against weeds, natural diseases, weather, elements. It's a this is why Christianity, Presbyterianism is so strong among farming communities like the Amish and the Plymouth Brethrens and the Calvinists, the most extreme Abrahamic Presbyterians. They're at war with nature because God is punishing them for casting them out of paradise. And this is so different than the relationship that the pagan has with the natural world. We live on Gaia. This is Mother Earth. The beautiful country I live in is named after goddess Hera. This is a sacred well to us is more than just healing waters from the earth. It is the cervix of the mother goddess. That's her fluid of life. The same water that comes from the earth is the same water that sustains humans and mammals and animals when we're in the womb or in the egg sac. It's the same. It's considered as above, so below. The same representation in another form. And this was also a problem for the Puritans. I'll call them from now on. The Puritans, this is idolatry. Idolatry. And this is why they don't even have things like baptisms and things like this, even though, because it's not mentioned in the Old Testament. This is what they were really after. They go back to the pure Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism. And as you know, Lucifer is a pagan god that was mistranslated in the Hebrew Bible, and every scholar of even biblical scholars and every Hebrew scholar of note will tell you that the King James Bible made a mistake, and there is not Lucifer. It was a mistake. Lucifer is a pagan god, the god of light, and that's because it was very easy to transpose this. And you have these theosophists in the truth movement and all over who play on. This is why I don't trust these theosophists and these Manly P. Hall types and Blavatsky types, because they're enforcing the rabbinical Lucifer, the Second Temple Puritan rabbinical Presbyterian Lucifer, which is a complete fallacy. They're not, and they're in denial of the classical pagan god, because that's Christian theosophy and all. That's just another form of Christianity. Now, this battle with nature continues into the present with the whole climate change thing. Remember, look how they think about nature, right? There's humans, and then there's nature, and we are not part of nature. Where do the climate change fanatics get that from? We've been cast out of paradise. You see, it continues. This is why this religious stuff is so dangerous. It can be transferred into secular life as well. So we've been cast out of paradise. Now, we have a problem if there's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What's the obvious now? How would a pagan address that? Forests. Pagans would be planting trees. Hindus would be planting trees. Taoists would be planting trees. How do the ones who have been cast out of paradise deal with it? Through penance, through punishment, divine punishment, carbon taxes, restrictions, curfews, punishment, the wrath of the God, the wrath of the Lord, a very much a Calvinist mentality, and you see it. Calvinist change, it should be called, more climate change, and that's just again a disconnect from nature. And this is you can see that, and so clearly, the relationship is not. They don't know anything about nature. They watch David Attenborough documentaries and think they have a relationship with nature. They watch the Discovery Channel, the BBC. They don't actually involve themselves with nature. Most of these climate change scientists don't even own a pair of hiking boots. They sit in labs doing experiments and building machines to punish us. And these are a modern version of the witchfinder's tools to see if we're sinners. We're sinners against, the idea of being cast out of nature, cast out of paradise, like their ancestors, their spiritual ancestors, Adam and Eve. The pagan has not been cast out of paradise, and neither has the Hindu. So therefore, we feel strongly if this planet was. This is why real pagans, and I'm not talking about Wiccans and things like that, and these cosplay druids standing on the side of a hill with a staff and a boner. I'm talking about real pagans, have an instinctual sense inside them that this planet is not in danger, because if it was, we would be the first to rally to the cause. We were the first ones actually to rally to the environmental and ecological cause. I was a member of the Irish Ecological Party, which became the Green Party, which was a monstrous communist Marxist organisation now. But originally what it was about was trees, pollution in rivers. That was the call to nature, to protect nature. And we were incredibly successful, by the way. Incredibly successful. There's so little pollution now in terms of industry and stuff like that than there was, well, in the West anyway, than there was even years ago. The reason why they still have pollution, massive pollution in America and in China, is because of, in America, it's a Presbyterian culture that doesn't care for nature. I'm not saying all Americans, I'm just saying that's where the culture comes from, with the corporate polluters. And on China, communists, Marxists, Maoists. And this is where that comes from, this disconnect from nature. And this is why you're pagan. I know that this planet will, if human beings wear pestilence on this planet, the planet will kill us. It will wipe us out. It will treat us like an antibody. We're still here. It hasn't done it yet, but there's every chance it will do it. And probably that's where all the resets in the past or the lost civilizations came from, those resets. So that's a very interesting thing to think about, is the relationship that the hardcore puritanical Christians have with nature. They see themselves as being God's personal creation and outside of nature, and that has transposed into secular life in terms of things like how climate change is dealt with. Rather than having a natural approach, rather than planting forests, they will build machines. Rather than have a more ethical way of farming and treating cattle particularly more humanely. And this is the reason why I still eat wild game, fish, and free-range eggs, but I've stopped eating meat, pork and beef and chicken, mainly because I was talking to someone who worked in a slaughterhouse, and the stories had me and please don't fill the comments down below with like what goes on in slaughterhouses. Let people find these things out themselves, like I did. It's shocking, and that's also part of it. If I could afford wild kill, a deer that was shot in the wild, I would have no problem eating that. It's purely the sheer monstrosity of meat processing it's horrific when you actually hear what goes on, and beyond, you would not believe it. It's worse than any horror show, any nightmare. Anyway, the thing is that is to deprogram yourself from this mind control thing that has made you believe that you're not part of nature. And it goes back a bloody long time. It goes back a very, very long time, and comes from a place where there's very little nature apart from the desert. And you think about that, the barren landscape of the environment will always be reflected in the soul. Also, the lushness of the landscape will also be reflected in the soul. Hence why Indo-European paganism is so rich and vital and celebrates nature, and so does Hinduism, and so does Taoism. It's the same thing. The colours of the Indian subcontinent and Sri Lanka, this way you have multiple gods and multiple goddesses, and that's why the Indo-Europeans had that. No, the Native Americans had it. We have to, without being bigoted, very important, to decouple our consciousness and ultimately our psyche and our soul. Remember, psyche is the Greek word for soul. From that. That may work in that environment, but we cannot impose it on ourselves, and we certainly cannot impose it on the planet. So beyond room 313, watch the video about St. Winifred's well. Add to this discussion there and here, and thank you for staying part of the conversation, because I have to say I'm absolutely loving that new channel. It's what I've been dreaming of for the last 10 years, and if only 10 people watch those videos, I don't care. I just love making them. And you take care of yourselves. Bye bye.